buy things like corporate bonds, putting money back into the economy. But despite all the different policies, bank lending to people like us hasn't really picked up. So what's going to change it?
Make it possible for banks to lend to these firms and then package up those loans into a package that the central bank could take onto its books as collateral for further funding for the bank that has been doing that lending. That is a proposal that seems to me to make a lot of sense, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
The last 4 of his 8-year term as ECB president saw Jean-Claude Trichet face the dark clouds of first the global economic slowdown and then the Eurozone crisis. Always with an eye on inflation, his policies were both admired and critiqued. Well, I caught up with him to talk to him about his decisions and also the ECB's actions today. Mr. Trichet, thank you very much for giving us time and coming on the show. When you think about the OMT in itself, in your opinion, do you think it's just rhetoric, and what happens if we have to actually go and use it?
Well, first of all, it's not rhetoric because the ECB bought treasuries twice when I was president myself. And that one of the reasons why the market trusted that this was for real was that we had done it already. That being said, as always, before and with the OMT, there is a conditionality. The country concerned has to call for being helped.
Comes back to the moral hazard question. What happens if these governments don't play along?
Conditionality has always been part of this exercise. If conditionality is not respected, the ECB shall not and should not ignore it.
The other fundamental question then would come back to what your expectations are.
We are in a universe where the ECB is giving all the liquidity which is necessary to all banks, commercial banks in Europe first. And this is something which can continue as long as necessary. This extraordinary position that the ECB has taken since the beginning of the crisis, but responsible position, preserving the primary mandate, sending the messages, the very strong messages to governments, parliaments, and to, I would say, all the private sector. We might, again, as I already said, expect that progressively the confidence is consolidating and that growth and job creation are coming back. You have the banking union, which has to be done, including the resolution authority at the level of Europe as a whole. We resisted the crisis, that's obvious.
That brings you back to the fact that you were the first central banker to react in August 2007. How would you change the situation to get the growth back in faster and get the credit flowing faster? Would you do anything different?
The messages according to the ECB, where crucially, you have to make your homework immediately because you put yourself in a very dramatic situation individually, countries that were attacked by markets, and collectively because you did not survey what you did. But in my opinion, in the recovery process, in the adjustment process, perhaps we could have insisted more on the fact that in adjusting, one should not privilege the insiders, those who have a job, to the detriment of the outsiders, those who have no job, and the young people, and so forth. Because the adjustment is triggering enormous amount of unemployment. And that particular message could have been perhaps sent more, I would say, forcefully. It's an economic message. It has nothing to do with monetary policy, but it is a message which I trust, with the benefit of the hindsight, we see.
Mr. Trichet, my final question to you. Do you think in this new normal we need to find economists, central bankers who think completely out of the box?
Had central banks not sent very strong messages to government that they have to react themselves as boldly and swiftly as possible, we would have had the worst crisis for one full century. And perhaps I could say for 2 centuries, obviously. So we have to be fully aware of that. We thought out of the box massively. What is important is that the permanent message coming from the central banks is we cannot substitute to other partners. What we are doing is necessary, in our opinion, because we have to pave the way for the appropriate transmission of our monetary policy, but do the job. Don't count on us to substitute to your own hard work. It is true for all public authorities. It is true also for all the private sector.
Mr. Trichet, thank you very much for your time in coming on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, madam.
Well, that's a wrap from here in Frankfurt, where winds of change are blowing not just through the city, but the central bank it houses. We'll see you the next time here on Real Economy. Until then, thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Well, the pictures you are now seeing come from Kenya, Nairobi, the country's capital, where the first of the victims from the Westgate shopping centre siege have been arriving in the city morgue. The city morgues have been put on standby by the authorities this morning, warning them to clear their decks and expecting a large influx of bodies. The official death toll remains at 62, although 3 soldiers were killed in today's assault. They've been hailed as heroes by the country's president, who we are expected to be making a statement to the nation very shortly, which we'll also be taking live. The Kenyan Red Cross earlier today revised its missing figures down. 51 people are now thought to be missing. However, we should prepare ourselves for the worst as Kenyan troops were making their way through Westgate this morning, trying to flush out the last pockets of al-Shabaab Islamic militant resistance. The soldiers reported horrifying scenes of bodies everywhere. It is extremely unlikely that the death toll of 62 is going to remain at that level. For the moment, we only have confirmed the deaths of 3 of the al-Shabaab terrorists, so making, along with the soldiers killed this morning, a grand total of 68 deaths. Although there have been reports that another 6 were killed. And there have also been a number of eyewitness reports in the last hour confirming the presence of a female among the terrorists, who apparently spoke English with a foreign accent and who appeared to be giving orders and directing the terrorists. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about who this person might be. There's equally been speculation about the makeup of the al-Shabaab commando, still estimated to be between 10 and 15 people. There is no definitive figure on the number of attackers yet. There's been an amount of speculation saying that a number of UK and American nationals were involved. In the case of the American nationals, the Kenyan Interior Ministry has gone as far to suggest that they were teenagers, with at least one coming from the Minneapolis region. But al-Shabaab in Somalia earlier denied that any foreign nationals were taking part in this operation, which it said was in revenge for the Kenyan Army's actions against it in Somalia. Since 2011, the Kenyan Army has had about 4,000 men in Somalia as part of an African Union force attempting to restore stability and the rule of law in that country. And the well-trained and well-equipped Kenyans have dealt a series of crushing blows to al-Shabaab, forcing them out of their urban strongholds and penetrating into their heartlands. Al-Shabaab had promised revenge for this, and now they've taken it. So we are now well into day 4 of this crisis, with the provisional casualty figures being 68 dead, including 3 government troops and 3 terrorists, 175 injured, and, says the Kenyan Red Cross, 51 people still missing. In the last half an hour, part of the roof of the Westgate shopping complex has collapsed. This probably as the result of the fire that started yesterday and continues to smoulder. Originally thought to be started by the al-Shabaab terrorists setting fire to a pile of mattresses to create a diversion. Although since then we've seen a number of photographs from the rooftop car park showing a number of burned out car shells. So the source of the fire, like so many other aspects of this 4-day crisis, remains confused. We will, of course, be returning to take the Kenyan president's statement live.
Anticipation is growing in New York for Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's maiden address at the United Nations. Tuesday's speech is expected to confirm his apparent desire to take a more conciliatory approach to the West. He's already agreed to new talks on Tehran's nuclear program. There's even speculation about a meeting with President Obama, the first between US and Iranian government heads for over 2 decades. But not everyone is in welcoming mood. Exiled Iranians protested outside the United Nations building, calling Rouhani a liar and a terrorist and questioning his political will to bring about reform back home in Iran.
We need a real revolution. Our people needs freedom and democracy, that's it.
But wider issues are taking priority over the domestic. Our correspondent says.
When Rouhani's predecessor Ahmadinejad spoke at the UN, diplomats regularly walked out. This time everybody wants to get in. Many at the East River believe that Rouhani holds the key to a diplomatic door of opportunity that can open a new perspective for the Middle East. Stefan Grobe, Euronews, New York.
An Egyptian court has banned all Muslim Brotherhood activities and those of any affiliated associations in the country and has frozen all its assets. The group have condemned the decision. It is the latest move in the crackdown on the Islamist group, which supports ousted President Mohamed Morsi. Since he was removed from power by the military on July the 1st, around 1,000 Brotherhood members have been arrested and many killed in violent clashes. The news comes just one day after the Constitutional Committee announced a rollback of the changes to the Constitution adopted under Morsi.
The amendment can be partial or can be total. Let me tell you that the general drive inside the committee is for a total change of the Constitution.
The state of emergency imposed by the military-backed interim government was extended for a further 2 months last week as tensions continue to boil over. The Islamist movement had been forbidden for decades before sweeping to power with their political wing, the Freedom and Justice Party, after the revolution in 2011. Commentators fear a ban will force more militant members underground, sparking fears of further violence.
Russian authorities say Greenpeace activists arrested after protesting against exploratory oil drilling in the Arctic will probably be charged with piracy. The campaigners' ship was taken to Murmansk after Russian Coast Guard officers boarded it and detained the 30 crew members. Greenpeace sent its ship, the Arctic Sunrise, to the platform 60 kilometers from Russia's northern coast. 2 activists thought to be Finnish and Swiss nationals tried to scale it. The Russian Foreign Ministry initially described
At FX Pro, we develop innovative trading tools designed to maximize your success. Transform your trading experience with the revolutionary FX Pro Quant Strategy Builder. Automate your strategies using simple drag-and-drop technology and predefined input parameters. Then save your trading robots, upload to your MT4 platform and watch your automated strategies in action. Experience the difference with professional auto trading tools from FX Pro. FX Pro. Trade Forex like a pro.
At the penal colony were forced to work up to 17 hours a day sewing police uniforms. She also accused a senior prison official of sending her a death threat.
Before the situation unfolded in the last several weeks, Nadia tried to change the situation internally from inside the prison. But obviously she understood that this was impossible, and in the end of her efforts, they just led to a murder threat from the prison administration.
Tolokonikova was sentenced to 2 years in jail in August 2012 after performing what the band called a punk prayer in a Moscow cathedral in protest against the rule of President Vladimir Putin. She's due for release in March, as is fellow band member Maria Aliokhina. A third band member had her sentence suspended.
An Argentine court has sent a Roman Catholic priest to prison immediately to serve a 15-year sentence for sexually abusing a teenage boy. Julio Cesar Grassi was convicted 4 years ago for abuse at his Happy Children Foundation. Last week, the Supreme Court upheld the jail term after the priest was found to have breached his house arrest conditions. He strongly denies the abuse. The expert said clearly that I don't have any of the features of a paedophile, no trace of paedophilia. The prosecution lawyer is lying. Allegations against Reverend Grassi surfaced more than 10 years ago. Later, he continued to live opposite the foundation despite accusations he'd abused several children there. Charges concerning all but one boy were dismissed for lack of evidence. Outside the court, angry supporters of the priest lashed out at the press after the sentence was confirmed.
Hundreds of workers held a mock funeral in Athens in protest at the disbanding of the municipal police service. Civil servants also took part, as around 12,000 are being suspended on partial pay and face losing their jobs. The government must make the public sector cuts to continue receiving international bailout funds. Spain's King Juan Carlos is facing hip surgery for a third time. It will be the sixth operation in 2 years for the increasingly frail 75-year-old monarch. There's been much speculation over his possible abdication. A recent poll showed that half of Spaniards thought he should step down in favour of his son, Prince Felipe. UN climate experts meeting in Sweden are due to publish a landmark report showing that global warming is mostly man-made. In it, they're expected to counter climate change skeptics who point to a slowdown in surface warming, with data showing the link between the use of fossil fuels and the general trend in rising temperatures.
They're not millionaires, but they spend millions every year in Monaco, an increasingly popular destination for day trippers. Souvenir shops, restaurants and attractions. A large part of the Monegasque economy depends on tourism. A day in Monaco. That's next on Target on Euronews.
At FX Pro, we develop innovative trading tools designed to maximize your success. Transform your trading experience with the revolutionary FX Pro Quant Strategy Builder. Automate your strategies using simple drag-and-drop technology and predefined input parameters. Then save your trading robots, upload to your MT4 platform and watch your automated strategies in action. Experience the difference with professional auto trading tools from FX Pro. FX Pro. Trade Forex like a pro.
A powerful earthquake with a magnitude of 7.8 has struck a remote area of southwestern Pakistan, according to the US Geological Survey. The tremor was felt just before 4:30 in the afternoon local time and was centered about 100 kilometers from the town of Kuzdar in the province of Balochistan. Reports say it was felt as far away as the Indian capital New Delhi, where buildings shook. In April, thousands were made homeless after an earthquake of similar magnitude in the same province.
BlackBerry could be sold for a meagre €3.5 billion after Fairfax Financial sets the minimum for bids on the struggling smartphone company. BlackBerry has given a provisional nod to the deal with their largest shareholder, though they will explore other options whilst talks continue. It comes as a blow to the company, which in its heyday in 2007 was worth over €100 billion. BlackBerry failed to grasp the imagination of the average consumer. It's seen as elitist. Individual consumers want a device with applications, a device that's a little more fun. The company posted a loss of almost €1 billion in its second quarter after disappointing sales of its new smartphone model.
Ladies and gentlemen,
in order to survive, it is pinning its hopes on niche markets, announcing a focus on highly secure phones for businesses and governments. Some analysts say a deal with Fairfax would give the company the breathing space it needs to figure out its future.
Shareholders in Telecom Italia have reached an agreement that will see Spanish telecoms provider Telefonica increase its stake in Italy's largest phone company. The deal comes after months of discussions, which will allow shareholders in Telecom Italia to withdraw, while Telefonica ups its interest. Telco shareholders, the holding company of Telecom Italia, have been looking for ways to exit after Telecom Italia's falling shares hit investors where it hurts most, in the pocket. By 2014, Telefonica will be the largest shareholder in Telco. German business confidence has improved slightly to move to its highest level in 17 months. The sentiment indicates that the German economy is showing a solid recovery. The Munich-based think tank IFO indicates that firms have become more upbeat about future prospects, with business expectations improving against the previous month. Manufacturers were more optimistic about their future than at any time in the last 2 years. More good news for Angela Merkel, 2 days after she won her third German election.
The spirit of her music.
Feeling this stream of energy.
Este fuego, estos sonidos.
Un vero anche amore per la musica.
Musica is brought to you by Rolex.
Russia says Greenpeace activists detained after protesting over oil exploration in the Arctic face piracy charges.
Iran launches a diplomatic offensive as its newly elected president takes centre stage at the United Nations.
Austria is extending its network of hydroelectric power plants, but are EU laws on nature protection being broken? Can environmentalists halt the project? Coming up next on Reporter.
Azerbaijan, a land of magic colors.
Build effective automated strategies using simple drag-and-drop technology with the innovative FX Pro Quant Strategy Builder. FX Pro. Trade Forex like a pro.
Is concerned that for some endangered species living in the upper reaches of the Schwarze Zolm, Austria's wild and untouched Black River, this autumn will be their very last. Two private investors, a landowner together with a wealthy prince, plan to build a hydroelectric power plant. Gepp, an internationally renowned professor of zoology, took Euronews around the threatened area and has stressed the importance of the Black River for the stone crayfish, a species protected by European law. Despite living in the river, it has somehow been forgotten by Austrian authorities. Gepp's struggle is not just about saving the stone crayfish, it's about saving a sensitive ecosystem.
Hundreds of endangered or rare species live alongside the stone crayfish. In the water we can find bullheads and the larvae of a protected dragonfly, the Balkan golden ring. There are butterfly species protected by European law, such as the Jersey tiger, and also some extremely rare Saxifraga flowers. If this ecosystem is changed in any way, all those species will be in danger.
In the Austrian capital, Vienna, we have an appointment with the president of an international pressure group called Riverwatch. He tells us the clash of interests is not just a local issue, but instead a global problem.
One of the very last untouched rivers in Austria is under threat of destruction. European law is going to be broken. If this is going to happen here, it can happen everywhere. Every river under EU protection would be at risk. Therefore, the impact of this case is much more far-reaching. It's not a local issue. It is a European issue.
Austria declared the Schwarze Zoom to be a river of national importance in 1998. In 2001, parts of it were included in Natura 2000, and thereby the river is now protected by European nature rules. However, the top quality river water is looked after by the European Water Framework Directive. We meet one of the investors in the project, a local forest owner, on the very spot where he has started preliminary building activities this spring. His Romanian workers and local protesters have clashed. One demonstrator was injured.
These types of small hydroelectric power units are compatible with nature protection. This has been outlined by many experts who carry out long and detailed water protection and nature protection procedures. All those who know me know that I'm a tough fighter. Once an idea is in my head, I'm not willing to abandon it easily.
Masser, living uphill in a traditional Austrian farm, got the OK from the regional Styrian government in 2007. But the national government, pressured by the European Union, has tried to stop the project. To protect the Black Zone, eco-warriors have set up a network of small camps across the countryside in order to ensure that Masser doesn't start to chop trees down. It's a colourful group. Younger activists mingle with elderly people, united by their common goal to save the Black Zone.
If 62% of the water is taken out of the river, and those are the official figures, it may even be higher than that, the river won't survive. It couldn't stay clean for long. The water quality will fall, the river will change completely, and will no longer be what it is right now, a natural monument, something almost holy. That will simply vanish.
The Black Zone is part of the very last 4% of untouched Austrian rivers. On average, there's a hydroelectric power station in an Austrian river every 8 kilometers. The small Black Zone project won't solve our energy needs, that's clear, and therefore I'm here trying to contribute in order to save this jewel.
The group faced a harsh Austrian winter ahead and have been discussing how best to cope with the difficult conditions. They've also been debating whether to organise a demonstration in Vienna before the upcoming national elections. By channeling the Black River water downhill, investors want to produce electricity, but locals have also been protesting against plans to sell drinking water from the river.
I'm taking part in this protest because I want to avoid the privatization of drinking water. It is not acceptable that two private investors make money from public assets.
Nearby we have the town of Schwanberg, a very popular spot with tourists, and we want them to continue visiting this area. If the river valley is modified, nobody will have an interest in walking along the banks of the river.
Our children and further generations should be given the chance to see rivers like this one.
In the capital of the state of Styria, Graz, the Social Democrats have been strongly supporting hydroelectric power, pointing out that Austria has no nuclear power but plenty of rivers. The region's Minister of Renewable Energy is preparing an action plan to further boost water energy.
I believe that hydroelectric power is important to us because of our geographical situation, which enables us to extend and further develop water power. We have clear climate protection goals drawn up by the European Union.
On the River Moor, several new hydroelectric power plants have been built. This one at Gussendorf produces electricity for 23,000 households, thereby saving huge amounts of CO2 every year. Out of the €90 million investment, 15 million was spent on ecological compensations such as fish passes. In Graz, the head of the Environment Department claims the water quality of the Black Somme can't be classed as excellent any longer.
The recent administrative update procedure concluded that the Black Somme River is not to the highest standard and its quality can only be classified as good. That means by issuing supplementary project design conditions, such as a modern fish pass, this hydroelectric power project can be accepted.
Zulm supporters recall that the water quality of the Black River has been classified as very good for decades. The EU Water Framework Directive prohibits any activity that would deteriorate the very few remaining waterways deemed excellent that still exist in Europe. Sabine Jungwirth from the Green Party and member of the Styrian Parliament suspects the regional administration has been altering records in order to avoid paying large fines from the EU.
I'm expecting that the EU sends a clear message to Austria. The country shouldn't ignore EU laws, but it does. Apparently, Austria wants to infringe EU rules. So the country has to bear the consequences. That's why the European Commission has to take the next step and bring the country to the European Court of Justice.
Back in Vienna, the Austrian Ministry of Environment has sent a letter to the state of Styria reminding them to respect all EU rules. The European Commissioner for the Environment, visiting Vienna to attend the European River Restoration Conference, is clear in what action must take place. But will the European Union save the Black Zone?
Since we have issued a letter of formal notice, that is obviously that we see that with the activity they are infringing the European Union law. In the most delicate cases where the things do not where the things are not settled, which is, by the way, not something which we would wish, then even fines can be imposed.
But there is also some good news in the conflict-riddled world of European river management. Some have improved their water quality, thanks to the strict implementation of European laws. To honour those long-term efforts, this year in Vienna the European River Prize was awarded for the very first time. Of course, not to the Black Zone.
The winner of the inaugural IRF European River Prize, the Rhine, the River Rhine.
Well, the sounds that you can hear are traffic noise near the Westgate shopping centre in Nairobi, Kenya. And for the last hour or so, that's all the noise we've been hearing. And as I speak, a gunshot rings out. The latest information we have from Nairobi is that the siege is nearing its end, if not ended. And now we've lost the sound completely. Traffic appears to be returning to the surrounding streets of the shopping complex following this 4-day siege, which it appears has been all but ended by Kenyan security forces this morning. It was as early as last night that the Kenyan Interior Ministry was announcing that the siege was over and that all the hostages had been freed. But in fact, most of Tuesday morning was spent with the sound of gunfire coming from the shopping complex as the final members of the al-Shabaab commando who took control of this shopping centre on Saturday night. And now we're going to get the live statement from the Kenyan president, I do believe. You don't have it on your screens as yet, but we have it on ours. And it appears that there is going to be some sort of statement. We'll be giving you these pictures as soon as we can.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, distinguished heads of state and government, excellencies, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Each year at this time, we come together not to preserve the status quo, but to drive our...
Anyway, at the moment you're hearing the sound from the feed that we are waiting to take. Now we're back to the live sound coming from Kenya. You can see from these pictures that it's a lot quieter than it has been over the last 3 days. The official death toll remains 68. That figure includes 3 Kenyan soldiers who died in today's assault, and 3 of the attackers. We've had unconfirmed reports that 6 attackers died today, but we've had lots of unconfirmed reports. We've had lots of contradictory reports. All 3 branches of the Kenyan administration, the government, the police and the army, have been releasing conflicting statements all the way through this crisis. But the big news today appears to be that the siege is over, or very nearly over. We were having sporadic, quite heavy gunfire all the way through the morning. That has died down. What we have heard is that the morgue in Nairobi has been warned to expect an influx of a large number of bodies sometime today. We also saw earlier ambulances leaving the shopping complex with their lights off, very quietly, not trying to attract attention from the world's press. And we heard reports that those ambulances were piled high with bodies. We've also had reports from some of the Kenyan soldiers who entered the complex today, talking about bodies being everywhere on all 5 floors of the complex. And we've also been starting to get a flood of stories from people who survived, including one fairly extraordinary eyewitness report I've just read of a 4-year-old British boy, a young lad called Elliot, who was hiding under a meat counter in a supermarket with his mother.
Can you come down, please?
When they were discovered, his mother was shot in the thigh, and then they were dragged out and remarkably spared by the attackers. Elliot, his mother, and his sister, slightly older sister, were all spared because apparently, according to this report, Elliot confronted one of the gunmen and said, "You're a very bad man," to his face, at which case the man's resolve appeared to crumble and he begged the child's forgiveness, saying, "We are not monsters," and giving him a Mars bar. Now, I've actually seen some photos of the children with their mother, shortly afterwards outside, standing in the pavement, looking very upset, very bemused, next to a dead body. We've also seen a report of a former SAS soldier who was just having a coffee in the shopping centre when the attack took place, and who apparently got hold of a handgun, took people out, and then kept on going back in. Apparently he went back into the complex about 12 times and personally saved about 100 people. Now his identity is not being released, but he's already being hailed as a hero, as are the 3 soldiers who were killed today. So we're still awaiting a statement from the Kenyan president, where we hope we'll get the final definitive version of what's happened. We'll be coming back for that live on Euronews.
A powerful earthquake with a magnitude of 7.8 has struck a remote area of southwestern Pakistan, according to the US Geological Survey. The tremor was felt just before 4:30 in the afternoon local time and was centered about 100 kilometers from the town of Kuzdar in the province of Balochistan. Reports say it was felt as far away as the Indian capital New Delhi, where buildings shook. In April, thousands were made homeless after an earthquake of similar magnitude in the same province.
Anticipation is growing in New York for Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's maiden address at the United Nations. Tuesday's speech is expected to confirm his apparent desire to take a more conciliatory approach to the West. He's already agreed to new talks on Tehran's nuclear program. There's even speculation about a meeting with President Obama, the first between US and Iranian government heads for over 2 decades. But not everyone is in welcoming mood. Exiled Iranians protested outside the United Nations building, calling Rouhani a liar and a terrorist and questioning his political will to bring about reform back home in Iran.
We need a real revolution. Our people need freedom and democracy, that's it.
But wider issues are taking priority over the domestic. Our correspondent says.
When Rouhani's predecessor Ahmadinejad spoke at the UN, diplomats regularly walked out. This time everybody wants to get in. Many at the East River believe that Rouhani holds the key to a diplomatic door of opportunity that can open a new perspective for the Middle East. Stefan Grobe, Euronews, New York.
Russian authorities say Greenpeace activists arrested after protesting against exploratory oil drilling in the Arctic will probably be charged with piracy. The campaigner's ship was taken to Murmansk after Russian Coast Guard officers boarded it and detained the 30 crew members. Greenpeace sent its ship, the Arctic Sunrise, to the platform 60 kilometers from Russia's northern coast. 2 activists thought to be Finnish and Swiss nationals tried to scale it. The Russian Foreign Ministry initially described their action as aggressive and provocative. Greenpeace argues that seismic tests are dangerous for animals such as whales and dolphins. The environmentalists denounced the Russian response as heavy-handed, accusing special forces of pointing guns at them and slashing their rubber dinghies. The authorities say the activists will be prosecuted regardless of nationality. Piracy carries a potential 15-year jail term in Russia.
Jailed member of Russia's Pussy Riot punk band, Nadezhda Tolikonikova, has started a hunger strike in protest at what she described as slave labour in her prison. In a letter to her husband, she said inmates at the penal colony were forced to work up to 17 hours a day sewing police uniforms. She also accused a senior prison official of sending her a death threat.
Before the situation folded in the last several weeks, Nadia tried to change the situation internally from inside the prison. But obviously she understood that this was impossible, and in the end of her efforts, they just led to a murder threat from the prison administration.
Tolikonikova was sentenced to 2 years in jail in August 2012 after performing what the band called a punk prayer in a Moscow cathedral in protest against the rule of President Vladimir Putin. She's due for release in March, as is fellow band member Maria Aliokhina. A third band member had her sentence suspended.
An Argentine court has sent a Roman Catholic priest to prison immediately to serve a 15-year sentence for sexually abusing a teenage boy. Julio Cesar Grassi was convicted 4 years ago for abuse at his Happy Children Foundation. Last week, the Supreme Court upheld the jail term after the priest was found to have breached his house arrest conditions. He strongly denies the abuse. The expert said clearly that I don't have any of the features of a paedophile, no trace of paedophilia. The prosecution lawyer is lying. Allegations against Reverend Grassi surfaced more than 10 years ago. Later, he continued to live opposite the foundation.